Today's lesson is National Foods with Surprising Origins. Hi everybody, my name is Roger.
And my name is Helen.
And it's all your lucky day because today we're going to be talking about food and we're going to make you hungry, so hopefully you can hang on until the lesson is over. But today, of course, we're going to talk about foods that come from different countries, but it turns out that these national foods aren't really from those countries in the first place. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that's true, because we tend to associate certain types of food with certain countries, but that doesn't mean that that country actually invented or created that food, because after all, in history, a lot of people traveled around from one place to another, and sometimes they would bring food from their own culture to another place, and then that other place adopts the food and then becomes the national food.
Right, so we've got a couple of examples of those in today's lesson, and the title of our article is National Foods with Surprising Origins. Origins that you will be surprised about. Of course, an origin just refers to where something comes from. And so we'll find out what these foods are in today's program. So let's introduce our topic with the first short paragraph right now.
National foods with surprising origins. From America and hamburgers to India and curry, every country has its own national food. But some of these national foods have surprising origins. Here are some examples.
So we're going to introduce today's topic, which is national foods. And it says here, from America and hamburgers to India and curry, every country has its own national food. So it is true that all countries, or at least many countries, have foods that are associated specifically with that country. And here are two examples. When we think of hamburgers, we automatically think of America or the United States. And then when we hear curry, we think of India. We might think of Japan also, but it's mostly India.
Exactly. So indeed, these are national foods. So again, if we say America, hey, what do you think of when we say the word America in terms of food? You'll probably say hamburger. And if we say India, you'll probably think of curry. If we say Japan, you'll probably say sushi or something like that. So every country has its own national food. But some of these national foods have surprising origins, and here are some examples. So again, we did talk about the word origin, and that refers to the beginning of something's existence. What is the origin of certain words? What is the origin of a certain superhero, etc., etc.? Well, we're talking about some origins of national foods, and some of these origins may be surprising to you.
Right, and the first food we're going to look at is something that belongs to Sweden. However, as we will learn, this food actually came from somewhere else.
Swedish meatballs. If you've ever eaten at IKEA, you'll have heard of Swedish meatballs, one of Sweden's most iconic dishes. What you might not know is that they aren't actually Swedish. Rather, meatballs were introduced by King Charles XII of Sweden, who took refuge in Turkey between 1709 and 1714 after his defeat in a war. When he returned, he brought the recipe for Turkish meatballs with him. The Swedes put their own twist on the new dish by adding jam made from lingonberries, which grow wild in Sweden.
大家好，第二部分我们看到名词 refuge 表示避难所。例如 ，If the snow gets too heavy, we'll need to find somewhere to take refuge. 如果雪下得太大，我们得找个地方避一下。或是 The rabbits took refuge in our garage for the duration of the storm. 暴风雨期间，那群兔子躲在我们的车库避难。另外，将 refuge 字尾加上 e， 就变成了名词 refugee， 意思是难民或是流亡者。我们可以说 Over the past few years, Germany has taken in many refugees from other countries. 过去这几年，德国收留了许多其他国家的难民。或者 Thousands of refugees have left the country in search of safer places. 成千上万名难民已经离开那个国家，去寻找更安全的地方。
Okay, let's talk now about the second part. The first national food that we're going to talk about is Swedish meatballs. Okay, a meatball, of course, is a ball that is made of meat. And I believe, of course, Taiwan has its own tasty version of meatballs as well. But we're talking specifically about meatballs from Sweden. So they're called Swedish meatballs. And if you've ever eaten at IKEA or IKEA, or however you pronounce that, you'll have heard of Swedish meatballs, one of Sweden's most iconic dishes. So again, that's a famous furniture store, and there are many branches of IKEA here in Taiwan. And if you've ever been there, of course, you probably went to their food court and enjoyed Swedish meatballs. And of course, it is an iconic dish of Sweden. If something's iconic, it sort of stands for that particular country. It's a symbol of that country. So again, there are a lot of things we think about when we think of Sweden. We'll think of, say, the Northern Lights, or we'll think of Volvo or Saab cars. And of course, we'll think about Swedish meatballs.
Right, so Swedish meatballs are iconic and you associate them with Sweden. What you might not know is that they aren't actually Swedish. Rather, meatballs were introduced by King Charles XII of Sweden, who took refuge in Turkey between 1709 and 1714 after his defeat in a war. So here we're explaining exactly where Swedish meatball came from, and we discover that they came from Turkey. They were brought from Turkey to Sweden by a king, King Charles XII, and he lived at the beginning of the 18th century. So he was defeated in a war. To be defeated means to lose in a battle or in a competition. So he was defeated. And after his defeat, he had to escape, because maybe there were people after him. They wanted to kill him anyway. So he took refuge in Turkey. When you take refuge, it means that you go somewhere to protect yourself from being harmed, or you go somewhere to escape danger. Now, for the word refuge, I could also say that the family took refuge in a cave to escape the violent storm. So refuge can also be used in other dangerous situations, not only in war. So it's a place where you escape danger in general.
Exactly. So there was some sort of war in Sweden, and King Charles XII had to leave Sweden or he would have been in big trouble. So he went to Turkey for some reason. He took refuge there. He was protected there. His enemies could not find him there. And Turkey, of course, is a great country in the Middle East there. They probably got some really great food and things to do. So he hung out there for about 5 years. He took refuge there. And while he was there, well, I'm sure that he was able to sample some wonderful local food. But again, he went to Turkey after his defeat in a war. Defeat, of course, refers to when you are beaten in some sort of war or competition. We often talk about the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat. So he was defeated in a war, and then he was in Turkey for a while, and then things were safe back in Sweden, so he went back. So when he returned, he brought the recipe for Turkish meatballs with him. A recipe is a set of instructions as to how to prepare a certain kind of food. It tells you the ingredients, and it tells you how to put them together and how to cook them, and basically how to prepare the dish. And the Swedes put their own twist on the new dish by adding jam made from lingonberries, which grow wild in Sweden. So this happens a lot of times when you bring a food from overseas. The people will try the food and they'll think, yeah, it tastes pretty good, but it might be better if we do this to it or if we add this to it, some of our local ingredients. So the Swedes put their own twist on the new dish. So here we've got an interesting phrase, to put your own twist on something, which means to basically do it your own way. Okay, you've got the original product, but you kind of change it a little bit. Like, of course, pizza in the United States is not the same thing as pizza in Italy. So the Americans put their own twist on pizza. They maybe used different ingredients or made the sauce a different way or used different kinds of ovens or whatever. They put their own twist on it, and in this particular case, the Swedes, or people from Sweden, they put their own twist on it by adding this jam made from lingonberries, which you can also enjoy at IKEA.
And that is the story with Swedish meatballs. Next, we are going to go to France and discover that one iconic French food that you could get from bakeries is actually not French at all.
Croissants. The croissant, which is considered one of the most representative French breakfasts, actually has its origin in Austria. The original crescent-shaped baked good, called a kipfel, was probably brought to France by August Song, an Austrian businessman who opened a Viennese bakery in Paris in 1838. Song's expensive, exotic kipfels took the city by storm. It was the French, however, who started making croissants with puff pastry, so the modern croissant is indeed their own creation.
第三部分我们看到形容词 representative， 指代表性的或是典型的。举例来说 ，We asked a small representative sample of unemployed people for their opinions。我们向一小部分有代表性的失业人口询问他们的意见。或是 That successful businessman is representative of what hard work can accomplish。那名成功的商人体现出努力可以达到何种成就。另外，这个字也可以当作名词，意思是代表或是代理人，像是 Tom has been a sales representative with the company for several years。Tom 在这间公司当业务代表已经好几年了。也可以说 At the trade show, Sean acted as a representative of his company。Sean 在商展上担任公司的代表。接着我们看到单字 exotic， 这个字是形容词，指外来的、外国产的或是异国风情的。例如 Megan has many exotic species of tropical plants in her garden。 Megan 的花园中有许多异国物种的热带植物。或是 The market was filled with colorful and exotic fruits and vegetables。 市场里充满了五颜六色的异国水果与蔬菜。最后我们看到片语 take something by storm， 表示风靡点点点，或是在点点点大获成功，像是 The new musical took Broadway by storm， 那出新的歌舞剧风靡百老汇。或是 The pop star's new album has taken the world by storm， 这名流行歌手的新专辑风靡全球。另外补充这个片语中的单字 storm， 这个字是名词，意思是暴风雨。举例来说 The game was cancelled because there is a major storm coming。 比赛取消了，因为即将有一场暴风雨来袭。或者 Many trees fell down during the storm。 暴风雨来时，许多树都倒了。
So now we're going to talk about croissants. The croissant, which is considered one of the most representative French breakfasts, actually has its origin in Austria. So croissants are representative of French breakfasts. Representative here means typical of people or of things in a particular group. So I could also say, as an example, that the president's ideas are not representative of the people's way of thinking. In other words, the president's ideas don't represent how the people think. And here we're saying that the croissant is representative or typical of French breakfasts.
Right, so if you're traveling in France or you know French people, they might often have the croissant as part of their breakfast. Just like here in Taiwan, xiaobing youtiao is representative of a typical Taiwanese breakfast. And in France, the croissant is representative of breakfast in France. So again, it's considered the most representative of French breakfast. They probably eat other things as well. But hey, it's not actually French in origin. It actually comes from Austria, which is kind of close to France, but still kind of far enough away for it not to be considered French. And the original crescent-shaped baked good called a kipfel was probably brought to France by August Zang, an Austrian businessman who opened a Viennese bakery in Paris way back in 1838. So, of course, we're describing the croissant as being crescent-shaped, like the moon. When you see the moon at sunset, sometimes the moon has that crescent shape, just like it often appears on flags in the Middle East, like the flag of Tunisia has a crescent moon there with a star. And I guess in Austria it's called a kipfel, or at least it originally was called a kipfel. And we don't know 100% for sure, but it was probably brought to France by this fella by the name of August Zang. And who was he? Well, he was an Austrian businessman who opened the Viennese bakery in Paris in 1838. So, of course, he moved to France, to Paris there, and he opened a bakery there, but it was a Viennese bakery. Of course, they probably already had French bakeries there all over the place. So in order to give them something new and different, he opened a Viennese bakery, a bakery that featured items or baked items in the Viennese style. Viennese, of course, means Vienna.
Zhang's expensive exotic kipfels took the city by storm. So these kipfels were exotic. They were interesting to local Parisians because they had probably never seen them before or heard of them or tasted them. So they were considered exotic. They were unusual or unfamiliar because they came from another place. And these exotic kipfels were also expensive. They were not cheap, so you had to spend some money to buy them. And they took the city by storm. When you take something by storm, well, I should say when something takes a place by storm, it means that thing became very successful in that place and people welcomed it and wanted to have it. So everybody wanted kipfels, which took Paris by storm.
Exactly. That sort of reminds me of, so long ago here in Taiwan when Portuguese-style egg tarts took Taiwan by storm. They could be bought almost anywhere. They were quite popular at that time. And way back in 1838, these kipfels took Paris by storm. They became popular really, really quickly. It was the French, however, who started making croissants with puff pastry. So the modern croissant is indeed their own creation. So we could say that the French put their own twist on the kipfel. They made it more like a puff pastry. So the original kipfel probably wasn't as soft and puffy like modern-day croissants are.
So puff pastry here refers to a type of light pastry that has a lot of air in it. So when you bite into it, it's very light and very airy. And this more modern version of the kipfel, which is the croissant, was indeed a creation of the French. A creation is just something that has been created by somebody using some imagination and some skill.
So, of course, we do have the original kipfel, but the French put their own twist on it and made it their own creation. So nowadays, of course, when people hear the word croissant, they will think of France as well. So you might hear this from chefs all over the world. They may create something new and exotic for you to try. Here, sample my new creation. Sample or try the latest dish that I have come up with.
That's right. So there are a lot of dishes that were created by France, by French chefs, and the croissant is just one of them. So that wraps up our talk on croissants. And now let's listen to our Chinese teacher.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。我们来看今天的文法重点。 课文第二部分介绍了瑞典肉丸的起源。那最后一句提到瑞典人在这道菜上面加入由越橘制成的果酱，替这道新菜色增添了属于他们的变化。文中他用到 put their own twist on 去表达再加上他们的改变。那么 twist 在这边是名词，就是指改变啊，或者是形式上的变化转折。好，那另外要帮同学们区分一下be made of 和 be made from 的差异，它们都可以表达由什么来制成，不过这两种用法表达的意义不一样哦。好，第一个 be made of 它是用来说明构成的材质原料。那你从成品外观是看得出它的制作原料的，像木桌、木椅，我们一看呢，就从外观就看得出它是木质的嘛。好，那举例来说 ，the food container is made of plastic， 就是说这个食物容器是塑胶制的。好，那么第二个用法 be made from 则是用来说明产品的来源。你从成品外观看不出原料，从这个制作原料到成品，它的本质已经改变了。举例来说 ，She likes to use soap made from pure vegetable oils。她喜欢用纯植物油制成的肥皂。那这边的 made 前面是省略了关系代名词和 be 动词。那像我们课文里面这个 jam made from lingonberries， 它也是经由省略而来的哦。好，我们再来看到课文第三部分介绍了可颂的起源。最后一句他写到说It was the French, however, who started making croissants with puff pastry. 开始用油酥面团制作可颂的是法国人。那这边用到分列句句型，我们来学习这个用法。好，要强调句子里面的某部分时，我们常常会使用分列句。那它的步骤是把原本句子里面你要强调的部分摆在 it is 和 that 之间，或者是 it was 和 that 之间。这个强调的部分可以是你原本句子当中的主词、受词、时间副词，或者是地方副词等等。然后呢，你再把句子其他部分摆到 that 之后，所以它的句型就会是 it is 或是 it was 加上强调的部分，加上 that， 再加句子其他部分。举例来说 ，The smell of fresh bread drew me to the bakery section. 新鲜刚烤好的面包香味把我吸引到烘焙区了。那如果用分列句去强调主词 the smell of fresh bread， 这个句子可以写作 It was the smell of fresh bread that drew me to the bakery section. 那这个句子就是在强调说，把我吸引到烘焙区的是新鲜刚烤好的面包香味，正是这个香味把我吸引过去的。好，那不过我们看到课文里面它是用 It was the French who 我们这边就是要补充一下，如果强调的部分是人，那么分列句里面的 that 可以改用 who 来表示。举例来说It was Karen who came up with the idea. 想出那个点子的人啊，是 Karen。这边我们就是强调 Karen 这个人物咯。好，那以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天的单字吧。
Refuge. We took refuge under the bridge and waited for the storm to pass. Defeat. After a number of bitter defeats, the boxer finally won a match. Recipe. Can you share the recipe for the delicious cookies you baked yesterday? Representative. This painting is quite representative of Picasso's early period. Exotic. That chef uses all sorts of exotic flavors in his dishes. Pastry. Jordan picked up a box of pastries for his colleagues on the way to work. Creation. No, we didn't help our daughter with the sculpture, it's entirely her own creation.
Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoyed reading along with us. I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.